My name is Sarah Morgan, but everyone calls me SA. I work as a legal consultant. For years, I believed I had built a quiet, stable life with a man I trusted. My husband, Dean, was charming, sharp, and persuasive traits that once drew me to him. But charm can be a mask, and it took a single night for mine to slip. It was just past midnight when I woke up to the cold side of the bed. Dean was gone. At first, I assumed he'd gone to the kitchen or bathroom, but when I sat up, I heard something else, a voice, low, careful, coming from the hallway. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help myself. I crept closer, barefoot on the hardwood floor, the soft glow of moonlight cutting through the blinds. Then I heard him say it, just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I froze. The tone wasn't angry or affectionate. It was calculated, calm, like he was giving someone reassurance. And he was definitely not on a work call. My breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it was about something else. But deep down, I knew better. I darted back to bed just in time. Dean returned seconds later, and I lay still, pretending to sleep. I felt the mattress dip as he settled beside me. "Where were you?" I murmured, groggy. "Bathroom," he answered smoothly, then added, "Just a quick work call." He didn't miss a beat. That was Dean's gift. He always sounded convincing. But that night, I started to question everything. The truth I would soon learn had been hiding in plain sight, and I was done ignoring it. The next morning, I woke up before Dean. His arm was slung over the empty space where my head had been, his breathing steady and peaceful, but I was wide awake. My mind was racing, echoing that sentence over and over. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed my phone, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. My heart was pounding as I opened our banking app. Dean usually handled the finances. I had access, but I rarely checked. There had never been a reason to, until now. My thumb hesitated before tapping into our joint account. When the numbers loaded, my stomach tightened. Over the past 3 months, there had been dozens of withdrawals, small ones scattered across different days. $500 here, $1,200 there, $800, $900, $750. Some were labeled vaguely, consulting, reimbursement, miscellaneous, but they didn't match anything we had talked about. Not groceries, not bills, not emergencies. I scrolled further. The pattern was subtle, but clear. Someone had been slowly bleeding the account. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I quickly locked my phone and turned around. Dean stood in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck, pretending to yawn. "Morning," he mumbled. I tried to sound casual. "What's for breakfast?" He smirked. "Guess it's your turn." He walked over to the counter, poured himself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the sink. I watched him carefully, then said it. "I checked our bank account this morning." Dean froze for a fraction of a second. Not enough for most people to notice, but I did. His hand tightened slightly around the mug before he forced a chuckle. "Oh, yeah," he said. "Everything okay?" "There are a lot of small withdrawals, stuff I don't recognize." He sipped his coffee, eyes fixed on the window. "Just small investments," he said. "Some business opportunities. You know how it is." I didn't respond because I did know how it was, and that wasn't it. He didn't ask why I looked. He didn't offer to show me details. He just carried on like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't unsee what I saw, and I couldn't unhear what I had heard. A quiet storm was building inside me, and Dean had no idea it was coming. That evening, Dean was unusually relaxed. He cracked jokes at dinner, flipped through the TV channels like everything was normal, and even offered to do the dishes. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed him. But I was starting to understand something. When Dean acted too perfect, it meant something was very wrong. Later, we sat on the couch. Dean scrolled through his phone, laughing at something he refused to show me. I leaned back, pretending to watch a movie, my mind working in overdrive. And then it happened. Dean got up to take a shower. For once, he left his phone on the coffee table, face down. Every nerve in my body buzzed. He never left his phone unattended. Never. I stared at it, unsure of what to do. But before I could talk myself out of it, the screen lit up. A text notification from a name I didn't recognize. Ilya Morrow. The preview said, "Just make sure she stays in the dark." Almost there. My heart dropped. The words blurred in my vision as panic rose in my throat. I had no idea who Ilya Morrow was, but whoever she wasn't just some colleague. This wasn't about business. This was a plan. A plan that involved me being left in the dark. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't need to. I had already seen too much. The water shut off. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, sat back on the couch, and gripped my knees to keep from shaking. Dean walked in minutes later, towel drying his hair, humming softly. He looked at me like nothing had happened. "Decided on dinner yet?" he asked. "Not yet," I managed. He picked up his phone, unlocked it without hesitation, and sat beside me like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. The text, the withdrawals, the midnight phone call, Lit was all connected. I had spent too long brushing things off, but now there was no more room for doubt. Dean was planning something, and I wasn't going to sit quietly and let it happen. The next morning, Dean was already in the kitchen when I walked in. He was sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone, humming softly. He looked like a man without a single worry in the world. "Hey, babe," he said with a smile, as if we hadn't been living in two different realities for the past few weeks. Then he slid a folder across the table. "Can you sign something real quick?" I blinked. "Sign what?" "Just some financial updates for tax season," he said, still scrolling like it was nothing. "You know, just routine paperwork. Makes things easier if everything's in one place." I picked up the folder and flipped through it. Legal jargon filled every page. At first glance, it looked standard: income declarations, tax forms. But halfway through, my eyes caught a sentence that made my stomach clench. Property transfer agreement. I froze. My name was there. So was Dean's, but the terms were chilling. With one signature, all of my individual assets, my savings account, my half of the condo, even the retirement fund I had built for years, would be moved into his name. Everything. I looked up slowly. Dean was watching me now, his smile just a little too wide, his fingers tapping rhythmically against his coffee mug. "Dean," I said carefully, "what is this?" He didn't even blink. "It's just a precaution essay. A legal convenience. If anything ever happened to either of us, this would make things easier. Nothing changes," he added. "Nothing changes." My voice was quieter than I expected, but inside, rage was building. He was sitting across from me like this was just another Tuesday, like I hadn't just read a document designed to rob me blind. I placed the papers back on the table and folded my hands. "I'm not signing this." Dean's smile twitched. His jaw tightened just slightly before he let out a light laugh. "Say, don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork. Then why are you so eager for me to sign without reading it?" He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "I really don't want to do this," he said, his tone dropping. His voice was calm, but the warning was there. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut. I didn't flinch. "Is that a threat?" A long silence stretched between us. Then I leaned back, forcing a smile. "You know what? You're right. I'll think about it." Dean didn't expect that. He thought he was the one playing the game. But the truth was, the pieces were already shifting, and I had just made my first move. That evening, Dean acted like nothing had happened. He cooked dinner, poured me a glass of wine, and even offered to do the dishes. If I hadn't read that document earlier, I might have believed we were okay, but now I knew better. Dean wasn't being sweet. He was being strategic. I played along. I smiled, laughed at his jokes, and let him believe that I had taken the bait. But every second we sat together, I was planning. After he went to bed, I stayed up. I opened my laptop and called Grace Holloway, my personal attorney. She had helped me set up my business years ago, and had always been discreet, loyal, and sharp. When she picked up, I didn't even have to explain much. Grace had seen situations like this before. She asked the right questions and walked me through everything. By morning, my accounts were moved. My name was taken off the joint savings. My personal investments were transferred into a private trust. I even filed paperwork to secure my half of the condo under separate ownership. Dean had no idea. He was too busy pretending we were still the couple he could control, still thinking I was the woman who wouldn't notice, who wouldn't act. But he was wrong. Every moment he spent plotting, I was building a shield around myself. Emotionally, too, I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking for honesty where it had never existed. I started preparing for what I knew was coming because Dean wasn't trying to fix our marriage. He was setting up his exit, and he wanted to take everything with him when he left. But I was ready now, and he had no clue how much that would cost him. The next morning, I found Dean already dressed, sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee, and a look on his face that I had seen before, calculated calm. "We need to talk," he said, setting the cup down gently. I tilted my head. "Oh," he sighed, as if what he was about to say caused him great emotional distress. "I think we should separate, S.A. It's just not working anymore." The words rolled off his tongue too smoothly, like he'd rehearsed them. "You have to see that," he added. I didn't respond at first. I just looked at him. Dean wasn't asking. He was informing me. He had already made this decision, probably weeks ago. So I leaned forward, folded my hands, and asked the one question I already knew the answer to. "You've been planning this, haven't you?" His jaw tensed just slightly. A flicker in his eyes, gone as fast as it came. "It's for the best, S. We've grown apart." Grown apart. That's what he was going with. He didn't mention love, didn't mention trying. This wasn't a conversation. It was a transaction, a speech, and he thought I would just nod and go along with it. I leaned back in my chair, took a breath, and then looked him dead in the eye. I already moved my assets. The silence that followed was deafening. Dean's posture stiffened. His eyes searched mine, looking for the bluff. "What do you mean?" he asked, too quickly. I kept my tone steady. "Exactly what it sounds like. Everything you thought was still sitting in our accounts. It's not. My name is off all of it, and you can't touch a single cent." Dean's jaw clenched, his eyes darkened. I saw the exact moment he realized he had lost. He stood abruptly, walked to the kitchen, poured himself another cup of coffee. His hands trembled just slightly. When he turned back, his smile was tight, cold. "You're going to regret this, say." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because this wasn't regret. This was clarity. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was dealing with. Dean stood there with that cold smile on his face, one hand gripping his coffee mug a little too tight. For a second, he looked like a stranger. But I wasn't afraid of him anymore. "You always were dramatic," he said finally, taking a slow sip. I tilted my head slightly. "You always were a liar." His eyes narrowed. The calm mask he wore so confidently was beginning to slip. His voice, once smooth and steady, had taken on a sharp edge, but I stayed composed. That's what unsettled him most. "You think you're clever," he said, stepping closer. "You think this little move means anything." I smiled. "It means everything, Dean. Because for once, you're the one left scrambling, He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He was choking on the loss. I could see it in the way he paced the room, clenching and unclenching his fists, in the way he avoided my eyes, in the way he kept checking his phone like there was still some hidden card he had unplayed yet. But the game was already over. He had bet on my silence, on my trust, on the idea that I would sit quietly while he dismantled my life. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the woman who excused the late nights or ignored the red flags. I wasn't the woman who looked the other way because it was easier than confrontation. No, now I was the woman who protected herself, who watched him with calm clarity while he unraveled. Dean tried one last time. He stepped toward me, voice low, almost pleading. We don't have to do this like enemies. We can work something out. I stared at him for a long moment. Enemies, I repeated. You made that choice when you started planning behind my back. He exhaled sharply, jaw tightening again. And just like that, the false softness vanished. His shoulders straightened, his voice flattened. Fine, then we'll see how this plays out. He turned and walked to the bedroom without another word, packed a bag, grabbed his car keys. When the door slammed behind him, the silence felt like a wave crashing through the apartment. But it wasn't a silence filled with sadness. It was peace. And for the first time in years, I realized I had saved myself. Not with screaming, not with revenge, but with truth, calm, and strength. He thought he'd win by taking everything. Instead, he lost the only thing that ever truly mattered, me. The days that followed were quiet. Dean didn't come back. There were no texts, no emails, just silence. But silence wasn't empty anymore. It was relief. I met with Grace again. We finalized everything. Separation of assets, legal protection, housing. I changed the locks. I filed for legal separation. And I made sure Dean had no further access to anything tied to my name. A week later, Grace forwarded me an update. Elia Morrow, remember her? The name from the message. She wasn't just a side fling. She was an offshore consultant Dean had hired to help him move my assets quietly, illegally, before the split. There were email chains, wire transfers, and documents drafted behind my back. But none of them went through because I had already pulled the plug. Dean's entire plan had crumbled the second I decided to act. He wasn't just trying to leave me, he was trying to erase me. But he underestimated one thing. My strength didn't come from how loud I could shout. It came from how calmly I could stand while everything around me tried to shake me. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about getting even. It was about protecting what I built. About reclaiming the voice I had silenced for too long. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt the ground shift under your feet because of someone's betrayal, remember, silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's just the pause before the storm.